He's taking care of some stuff.
Right. Okay, here we go.
And we're good.
All right, we on? All right, I think we're on. Welcome, everybody. It is 6 o'clock. I'd like to call us to order in accordance with South Carolina Code of Laws 1985, Section 30-4-80-E. The following have been notified of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting: the Herald, the Charlotte Observer, CN2, and WRHI. If I could ask first that we would you'd join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, you have all received a copy of the agenda. Were there any adjustments or corrections? If not, that will stand as presented. In your package, there were minutes from both the March 1st and the March 15th meetings. Any adjustments or correction to those?
There was a misspelling in public participation on
Okay,
on the first one, 3-1, or
Okay.
whatever it was. Ms. Noto's last name.
okay. Will you double check the names on that and get that corrected? Thank you. All right, with that one adjustment, those will stand as presented. We do have one card for public participation, so I'm going to ask Ethan Lewis to come up to the podium. The way our public participation works is you'll have 5 minutes when you come up to the podium. If you'll state your name and address, and then the time is yours.
Name and address?
Yes, please.
What does that mean? I'm sorry.
Just state
Your name and where you
your
live.
address.
Oh, where I live? Oh, Ethan Lewis.
That address.
Gotcha.
We got it.
Ethan Lewis, 1148 Advent Drive, apartment 101, Fort Mill, South Carolina, 29708. All right. Good evening and happy Tuesday, everyone. My name is Ethan Lewis, and I am a representative from Nation Ford High School. Although this is my first time at this podium, this is not my first time speaking with the board, as Monday I had the honor of giving you all a tour of my school. My school has raised me since I was 14 and will continue to do so until I graduate, which is why I stand here today and propose an idea that aims to ensure the continued safety of myself and other students like me. This idea stems from other schools around the country that have set examples of implementing student ID cards in their districts. Since implementation of other safety precautions such as metal detectors and transparent backpacks have a negative connotation and implications, the very least we can do is create a school identification system by providing students with ID badges. These cards will be used to open doors for such individual students. For instance, if a student has a class outside of the building, such as the JRTC building, they will have access to go into the building from outside of the main building. This allows students to re-enter the main building once their class or activity is over. Along with these benefits, it is also useful for the identification of students within the building for any given reasons. All students must wear their ID badges while in school in a visible area for staff. If the student ID badge is not visible, they will be asked to show it, but if they cannot, for any reason, they will be asked to go to the main office and be provided with a temporary one. These ID badges will include pictures of the student's face, name, and barcode used to check out books for the library and any other information that the district seems important. I want to mention that these security cards would be preferably made out of a material like aluminum, as materials like plastic are harmful to the environment, as we have seen with the plexi shields that are now being just taken up space in our hallways and waiting to be brought to landfills. Secure and safe schools should be the utmost important topic addressed tonight. Students like myself should not have to worry about such dangers like school shootings or intruders. The unfortunate truth about this society is that is the reality. And it's just a matter of time before we become just another tragic news story and gruesome statistic. Let's not take the roughly 280 people who have lost their lives to school shootings in vain or for granted. May we be proactive in this prevention and not adding to the more unfortunate sacrifices. May they rest in peace, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for the record, there are people in the room that heard your update that would be the ones to look into whether that is a possibility or not. So thank you for presenting that idea. We have several staff reports tonight, the first one being a monthly financial and impact fee update from Ms. Lordo.
Okay, good evening. Tonight in your packet, we have the monthly financials for February. That is the 8th month in the fiscal year. Total revenues were $130,992,415. Total expenditures, $108,048,125. So we are in a period of positive cash flow, which is always good. 22.9 million positive. We're now operating in the months of using the property tax funding to meet the monthly cash flow needs, with vehicle taxes still coming in monthly. So we're now in delinquent tax collections for real estate. We had $336,706 collected in real estate taxes this month. We continue to have vehicle taxes closely monitoring that. We're about $1 million a month. I've shared this month we were $947,000. So we were right at that estimate. As I continue to look at projecting out to June, I still think we will probably come in about $1.5 million over budgeted property taxes. If our vehicle taxes continue to come in at that ratio for March, April, May, and June, we'll be at about $1.5 million over. Any other questions? I did not have any other concerns about the February financials, unless any of you had any questions. I'll move on to impact fees. We have now exceeded $50 million in collections, $357,112. We've collected on 1,904 single-family units and 1,314 multifamily for a total of $3,218. 3,218 units. Interesting fact that Pat Pettis shared with me today, we've exceeded, since impact fees started at the initial $2,500 amount, we've collected over $100 million, but now half of that's been collected with our new impact fee since July of 2018. So we thought that was a landmark number. Comparable data for single family, we're still operating about 41% less for the most recent 12-month period to the period March of 2020 to 2021, which, as we continue to say, we expected just with the pandemic during those months. Multifamily, as you recall, we had our largest collection last month, so we've somewhat swayed our 12-month comparable data. So we're still at 87% more collected in the most current 12 months versus the 12-month period March 2020 to March 2021. We collected in multifamily apartments for 437 units compared to 233 a year ago for the rolling 12-month period.
It's about the number of that one.
It's about the number of that one. Our average, I think I've shared with you, our average 2021 collections were $800,000 per month, and our March 2022 collections exceeded that slightly. It was $1,027, 332. So for March, we're still slightly over our average 2021 collections. So as we have kind of seen with the daily permitting, we're starting to see that increase coming back. As far as
You meant $1 million.
$1 million, I'm sorry, $1,027,000. So we're over the average collections monthly from last year. In 2022, we're starting to see more permitting at the county level.
Well, and I know some of us were talking earlier, we've had some conversations with county, city, town. I mean, the projects that we've known about are at the point now where they're progressing, right? So
It appears, yes, it appears. We're seeing a steady flow coming in from the county. Any other impact fee questions?
I've seen some of the properties in Windhaven Meadows. Those look like those were waived.
Yeah, that's senior living.
Right,
Yes.
but I thought the senior living was
No.
a reduced impact.
No,
It's not at all.
It's waived
Okay.
altogether.
It,
Same with
right,
Carolina.
100%
That's right,
waived,
that's right.
yes. And I've seen a few lately that were waived due to if a house is completely demolished and rebuilt, that is also waived.
Right,
And I've
because
seen a few of those come through in the last couple months as well. And they put a full explanation of that on the report. Y'all have probably seen it too on the monthly report. So, I'll go ahead and just touch on a couple dates on the state budget. As you know, the House has passed their budget in record time, 1 day and a half, no discussion. It is now in the Senate Finance, actually in some of the subcommittee work. It will be in the full Senate Finance next week, and they will deliberate the budget starting on April 12th. It will then go to the full Senate floor on the week of April 25th is their calendar. The governor's new funding plan, which the House passed without any discussion, is a major change from the current EFA funding, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more on the next agenda item. But then the last thing I wanted to mention is just to share with you, our Student Nutrition Department hosted representatives from the State Department last week for their program audit. It's an every 3-year audit. It's called their AR review, administrative review. I sat in on the exit conference last Friday, and the lady, the key representative for the State Department, she said they had completed 17 reviews this year. She said ours was the best so far. She said really amazing what we're doing operationally in our cafeterias. They will do a full written report that we can share with you, but there was only one corrective action, and it was already addressed on site. They went to 3 of our schools, happened to be 3 of our new schools, and spent 3 days with them. They look at your menus, they look at your production records, they look at your point of sale system as far as meal counts. It's very detailed. So we were extremely pleased. I know that Tammy and her staff were ecstatic to have that done, and they all left with smiles on Friday.
And Leanne, you mentioned that the one corrective action was something like the way an email was worded.
It was a letter, it was one of our parent letters, something in the wording, they wanted different wording that was required.
But it wasn't an operational
Correct.
process within the cafeteria.
They called it just a minor corrective action, but they said it was necessary because of federal compliance on the wording in the letter.
Leanne, what point of sale unit are we selling, or using?
We use Titan.
Okay.
We previously used Meal Plus, which is a pretty popular vendor name, and Titan actually bought Meals Plus, and it has it is a different system, but with a lot of the aspects of Meals Plus. But we're excited about it. You know, the first year we've had some ups and downs with it and trying to work through with them, but we feel like it's a little bit more of a robust system for us. So we have spent this year somewhat working with them just to finalize some of the interfaces with that system.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
I know some of our neighboring districts have had some challenges in their food services, and so we were able to check that any issues that have occurred elsewhere have not occurred here.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions about the monthly report? Okay. Move on, talk about the 2022-2023 budget. It's a very interesting time. As I mentioned, the House passed their budget, which fully supported the governor's new funding model 100%. They passed it with no discussion, had 2 readings in the same day, and then had the 3rd reading the next morning. So it's now moved to the Senate. So we're very aggressively working our senators. Our 4 school districts in York County jointly sent a letter to our representatives. We've also all have individually sent notification, information, request out to our teachers and all of our school staff, asking them to please get in touch with our senators and if they have concerns about this, we just want them to be informed. We have heard feedback that is causing a lot of discussion among the senators across the state, because not only did York County do that, Spartanburg districts did that, all the Columbia area districts did that, Greenville did that. So we feel like we have gotten a lot of traction with getting our teachers involved at this stage and having them voice their concerns. Just a couple key points about this funding model. At the governor's press conference last week, for any of you that watched that, there were a couple key points that he emphasized that I've heard before. They feel that it simplifies the funding formula. It does roll up multiple funding lines to $1 amount. So they feel like that simplifies the funding formula for the outside taxpayer to see what they're funding for education. It raises the teacher pay scale to a minimum state teacher pay of $40,000. There are 50 districts that pay currently under $40,000 starting teacher pay. There are 26 districts like ours that pay above the state scale. The initial communication from the governor's office was that every teacher in South Carolina would get a $4,000 raise, but that was not funded in this funding model. Now they have tried to, I guess, go back and clarify that no, the intent was really that every teacher would at least make $40,000, and if you are in a district that already pays above, you would not need to implement any change in your salary schedule. So that was clarified by the governor at his press conference last week.
It's not a change in the steps,
Correct.
it's just a change, provided additional funding so other districts can also pay above the scale.
It is an adjustment to the beginning teacher sale, well, to every teacher sale on the state minimum. So the current state minimum, a first-year teacher with a bachelor's degree would have a starting salary of $36,000 this year. This scale would increase to $40,000 for them. And then every sale past that would increase $4,000 proportionately. It changes the state minimum. If you're a district who is already over, okay, we are a district, we pay 15% above the state minimum. Our starting salary is $41,400. We would not have to implement any changes to our scale
Because it's already above 40.
because it's already above 40. If you're a district that currently only, your scale, you pay 1% above, but it only gets you to $39,000, you would have to implement a $1,000 increase to the $40,000 minimum.
And a real example that I had learned last week, to give an example, so Chester was talking about their starting teacher pay in cell 0 is $39,960.
Yes.
So they are $40 short. So when you talk about the 50 districts that don't pay, Chester is one
Right.
by $40. So they have to give a $40 raise, period, full stop.
But because we're already above
But they only
the
have to give a
40,
$40 raise,
Right.
not a $4,000 raise.
Right.
and because we're already
Understand
above
all
the
that.
40, by the way they're funding this and the way they're putting this out here, we are not obligated because we already pay more than that to begin with. And they're not funding that. We fund that locally.
Correct. So a couple other points about the new funding model. Currently, EFA funding is based on a 70-30 split, meaning the amount allocated per pupil, which is currently $2,516, the state funds 70%, we have to locally match 35%. But any dollars we receive under EIA funding, like at-risk funding, we currently receive at 100% with no local match requirement. Under this model, there are multiple EIE categories rolled into this new formula, and they would also go into the split, and now the split is going to move to 75-25. So now we would also have to locally pick up 25% of any of those EIA dollars that are shifting into this funding model from local funds. There's also several factors that are not advantageous for us, one being the poverty weighting. The poverty weighting under this plan is proposed to go from 0.2 to 0.5. That significantly impacts us as the lowest poverty district in the state. They've also eliminated the career and technology funding and dual credit funding factors. They also still, in this formula, are imputing the amount for ITA, or index of taxpaying ability. So it is still harmful for a district like ours, where we are still primarily residential. We have a perceived tax base that we're not collecting on for homeowners, but it goes into the formula. Also with this, it's not based on an amount per student like the current EFA formula, but it's based on a pot of money statewide divided by the weighted pupils that we have. So it's coming at it from a different angle than what the current EFA formula. So all of that going into the new calculation, the bottom line is we are projected to lose the greatest amount in the state at $7.3 million is our loss over current dollars. They have put in funding for the 1% South Carolina retirement increase, as well as the health insurance, and that is netting us down to a loss of $5.3 million versus $7 million.
Let's use easy numbers for everybody to understand. If we're gonna lose $5.5 million, what does that equal in the number of teachers?
It's about 94.
94 teachers, that's more than a
Yes,
school.
yes. There's a lot of discussion about hold harmless. They would, right now, are saying they'll hold us harmless for the 5.3, but that would just bring us back to a break even. We then are still required to provide that step increase for our teachers. We also have some other operational costs that we would incur, such as utility increases, cleaning cost increases, technology cost increases, things that you've heard me say, that's cash out the door. We've got a plan for that. I mean, this does not really consider other operational cost of a school. It's just based on teachers. I think something will come out of the Senate. I think we today, Dr. Epps and Christy Spears and myself, we went to the Senate Finance K-12 Subcommittee hearing. There was a lot of good points brought out at that meeting. I think some things will change. I don't think we'll get to where we're getting $7 million. But we'll see what happens over the next 2 weeks and what we hear, what happens with the discussions.
And their hold harmless factor is only good for 1 year.
Right now, and that's a very big concern for us. And that was discussed multiple times today. Specifically, there's no guarantee, it would be a year to year. The General Assembly would have to decide to hold us harmless. What we would like to see, the school business officials across the state, what we ask for is we certainly support flexibility. I mean, we would love more flexibility. We don't mind more accountability. If there's more reporting publicly on our website more frequently, we can support that. We will be glad to do that. But the problem with this formula is the distribution methodology. And what we would like for them to do is distribute the funds like they did this year with the $1,000 teacher salary increase. Every district received the $1,000 times the number of teachers that were in the South Carolina Educator system, or the old PCS system. So every district did receive the correct amount of money to fund the teachers for the $1,000 increase. That's what we would like to see them do for the impact on the teacher salary scale. So if the pot of money is set, just distribute it equitably among the districts and not use this type of a formula with all of these factors.
Ms. Lauder, so
Yes.
for acute clarity, you used the word flexibility, you all would be. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
When they roll up certain line items like EIA funding, and I'm going to give you an example of something that's rolling up is at-risk funding. If it rolls up and we're going to get one lump sum dollar amount, then they're saying you can use that at your district in how you need to prioritize your needs for your district. You don't have to keep using it in these special categories,
Got it.
is what they mean.
Ms.
And,
Lauder.
oh, I'm sorry. And they also said today even, as far as new funding, districts that are already paying over $40,000 could choose how they use that. They could use that to help increase their scale. They might choose not to if they have other needs. That's what they call flexibility, is that at the local level, you would decide how to use your pot of money.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Lordo, so just looking at the report that you just went over, budget of about 178 roughly million.
Our current budget, yes, is about 178.
So what you're saying, if the budget formula that passed the House is enacted by the Senate, that we're starting out at 173 for next year? Is that what you're saying?
Then if they hold us harmless, we would be back at the 178.
Okay.
But then we've got these other things that we have to fund next year.
That the formula is 170.
Yes.
Hey, did they put in the hold harmless in the
It's in the House version,
Proviso.
in the proviso.
proviso?
Yes.
But otherwise, you're starting out at 173
Correct.
because so you're a haircut of over what we are expending currently.
Correct.
Which doesn't plan for growth.
Right.
So how would that
And
work with student growth? Would we actually see any additional revenue based on additional student numbers?
well, that's a good question, and we've asked that, and we've been told by I've heard Frank Rainwater speak to this, that they would rerun the formula, the model at probably the 45th day, but definitely the 135th day. But you would then have to outgrow your other districts, because remember, it's still the same pot of money, and it's just reallocated based on your proportional weighted number of pupils to the statewide total.
That's the key.
Yes.
Is right now, we have called 18,000 out of 800,000.
Right.
So if we have 18.5, we now have 18.5 out of 800,000. So it's not an allocation per student. It's just that instead of being 1.92%, we're 1.925%.
Is it funded by the per student currently with EF?
Currently, it is.
It is.
So they're really looking at taking a pot of money that would so if South Carolina net gains students, the pot of money would grow
No,
No,
under the current formula.
under the current, yes.
Current formula.
under the current.
Under the proposed formula, if South Carolina gains students, and I do believe South Carolina's growing in population last I
Not in
checked.
students. They said they lost.
South Carolina lost students, growing in population but lost students. So.
I have not heard them say that they are setting aside additional dollars for statewide pupil unit growth.
Right.
I have not heard anyone say that yet. I've just heard them say they would rerun these formulas,
Based on the same
And
numbers, even if you had a net increase in
correct,
students, then.
and redistribute.
But at the end of the
Yes.
day, they promoted and let everybody know that there will be no losers in this.
Yeah.
No losers
Yes.
whatsoever.
Right.
And we've now learned that there's 29 out of 81 losers, and we are the biggest.
And even some of the 50 districts,
Look at Chester, the example.
even some of the 50 districts, even the lowest district in the state that only pays the state minimum is not getting enough new funding to fund the 4,000. So there's really two problems with this. There's one, there's not enough money put in the bucket.
Is the
handle it.
bucket, are they reducing the bucket or restricting the bucket, the total bucket from current year's funding to next year's funding?
They're putting in additional dollars.
putting in additional
It's just how it's going to be distributed across the state.
It's
How
not
the-
enough to bring everybody up to the $4,000
Right,
rate,
right.
Well, it's not enough to pay for,
plus a step.
inflation,
Right.
Right.
stuff that goes up normally
So
every
the
year, right?
focus-
Is that-
Correct, correct. Yes.
So this is something parents could be concerned about or should be watching too, that the state is not giving education the dollars that they should be as a whole.
Well, I thought Dr. Greg Little, who's the superintendent Lexington 1, which is also a growing district, he spoke today because his senator was on the panel. And he made a good point. He said, this plan is not pushing forward education in the state of South Carolina. Because all districts will have to look at the funding versus the number of teachers versus, and even he said, which was almost identical to us, 89% of our budget is positions. And those positions are supporting the schools and serving the students directly. So there's just not a lot of place to go to if you need to make up that amount of revenue loss.
There was conversation about, basically how do you get more efficient? And that's when he pointed out, well, it's all people. So being more efficient means doing the same thing with less people, right? That's the only way to get more efficient is to have less staff, which means class sizes or special services or whatever. And then
Or cut services.
or cut services, because the other thing, you mentioned that like Kate not being funded.
Right.
A lot of the districts talked about the Kate programs are expensive. Right. So if those programs are not going to have the funding, can they continue to be offered?
Just a couple things I'll close with on this, and then we can I'll be glad to answer any other questions that you have. But as far as our local budget, and we're certainly running our numbers almost daily right now, but I know that you as a school board and in the administration here, we fully support a teacher pay increase, and we want to do as much as we can. And we have prioritized that as our number one funding item, and we'll continue to do so when we bring our plan to you. We've also always treated all of our employee groups the same, meaning if our teacher salary scale receives a cost of living or X amount of increase, like last year it was the 1,000, we also budgeted that for all employees in the district. We will have a few, as we've kind of alluded to, we will have a few things that we're going to need to plan to cover next year. We've committed to 20 new teachers. They've been hired for growth. We have additional utility and cleaning cost. We have the technology contract increases that we have every year. And then another thing we have to plan on is we're starting to need to move positions that were in ESSER. We're just starting that with ESSER 1 and then a few things from ESSER 2 that we've got to move into the general fund to continue those services. And we've been planning, we knew that was going to happen. And that will affect us even more this time next year with those positions that need to come in. So we're going to have a few things, but we're running the cost on step increases that we know we need to do for all employees. We're running the cost on, I can tell you that the retirement and the health insurance were not fully funded for us. We've ran those numbers. Those aren't fully funded, so those have to be locally
We
funded.
have to pick up 25% of that,
Correct.
right? I mean, that was by design.
So there's just, we're pulling the pieces together, and we'll have more to share publicly at the next meeting, and hopefully we might have more good news as we hear the discussions the remainder of this week and next week in the Senate Finance. But we strongly encourage our teachers and staff to reach out to our senators and share their thoughts about this.
Just looking at some of the State Department of Education statistics, while it might be true that total student population decreased in 2020 to 2021, that was a one-time dip, I would
Correct.
bet, based on pandemic measures and parents making different choices. Interestingly enough, by the 45-day count, it's back up to the previous numbers. So that's what, it surprised me that somebody's saying that the student population is decreasing in South Carolina. I can't understand how that would happen. I don't think it is.
And it wasn't put in context of an ongoing decrease, it's just the number that they had run initially and the number that they've run now was less.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
Ours wasn't less.
Well, I don't think statewide is either. I mean, the numbers don't show that either. It's pretty interesting that it's continuing to go up and that it did have a dip. I think we saw that at the beginning of that school year as well.
And we voiced, I mean, across the state, we voiced our concern about that as well. That a lot of districts, like ours, saw a dip, and we fully expect those students to come back into our school system. And how is the state going to handle that come August when so many more students are coming back in after the pandemic?
Yeah, the current 45-day counts match the 19 to 20 enrollment. Pretty much right on.
So, Leanne, if a district starts out, once all the dust is settled, and a district starts out with a certain allocation, $100 million, and then 45 days later, they have actually got less students, because while we're growing, there are many districts in the state that are not. And they'd planned for 100 teachers. But their funding would be adjusted, in theory, down, because their percentage of the entire South Carolina student population would be less, right?
That's my understanding, is that it's no longer based on an amount per pupil. It's based on this statewide allocation of your weighted pupils as a percentage of the statewide weighted pupils.
So the funding you thought you had to cover your staff
Correct,
suddenly is less.
correct.
So the reminder is,
Call
the
your
budget
senator.
we approved, the budget we approved a year ago or months ago, which was 177-ish,
Yes,
88 to 90% of that are salaries and benefits.
correct. Correct,
That's,
And so if we
Correct.
get 172,
mhm.
173,
yes.
it's not enough.
And another, and I'm really just going off the top of my head, but another 6 to 7% of that are the overhead costs to operate our schools.
Utilities.
Utilities.
Okay, so now you're telling me
Utilities, insurance,
so now you're
cleaning.
telling me we're at essentially 96, 97,
correct,
98%.
correct.
2% left out of 178 million.
Yes. So we can save on, I guess, buying some pencils and paper, or,
No more pencils
I
for
mean,
you,
you know,
Lights out,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Picture that.
I felt at least somewhat encouraged that the lack of Kate funding, the lack of dual credit funding, the reduction in, one of the other things is while the poverty weighting went up significantly. So for every one of our non-poverty students, the weighting is 1.5 for a district with a poverty student, right? That's a major swing. But ELA students actually went down. The weighting for an ELA student went down.
That's an area we're increasing.
Right, so, I think some of that started to resonate, with this committee.
Yes,
And the the realities of, just the ability to take care of our teachers who've taken care of our students for these last couple of years.
I think one point that was made today that I think the three of us would agree was pretty significant. I think at some point in the questioning, one of the senators asked the CFO person of the districts, were y'all ever at the table?
He asked Frank Rainwater.
This reminds me,
Yes.
in other words, this plan was developed by the governor's office, and it may be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Let's, but we couldn't run the numbers to see how it impacted school districts. It was done in a void with no educators involved. That's fine. Reminds me of Act 388, which was done in a void on the back of a chicken salad sandwich box or something, with nobody. So you got these unintended consequences, and they may be good or they may be bad. I don't know. I just point that out. Here we are now trying to figure it out. It'd have been nice to have been sitting in last summer. Well, let's look at this. Let's do it. But that's just my editorial comment.
That's a great point. I mean, I think that was made very clear to the senators on the subcommittee today.
So the bottom line here is, I mean, you're certainly sharing with us a concern, but the reality is, if we don't get concessions, we're going to have to adjust our calculus,
Correct.
whatever that may be.
Correct.
I think that's where parents and taxpayers should reach out and talk to the people making these decisions. Because it's affecting all of us. It's affecting our children, which is our future. It's affecting our teachers. Are they going to be able to handle higher classrooms, more students in a classroom? And then our taxpayers, because, ultimately the taxpayers are the ones that are going to pick up this bill.
Well, and that's the businesses
Right.
of York
Yes.
County. So while, the county council wants, everybody to reduce taxes on the businesses and be more business friendly and so on and so forth, the reality is we don't have a whole lot of choice in the matter because we don't have, houses paying for taxes for education. They're paying for building, but not the actual classroom. And we don't have enough businesses to support that some of our other local county partners have. They have a little bit better advantage than we do, but they're still behind the eight ball the same as we are. So it's the businesses that are going to see and reap or not reap the biggest impact to this because that's how that's going to go.
And the point was made today that reminded me that even if you wanted to, you do not have the ability to raise taxes enough to cover this deficit under Act 388. You are still, as a local school board, limited in what you can approve in tax millage increase. And so all of the districts that are in the higher deficit areas are saying that same thing, is that they could not even locally raise enough revenue to make up the difference, to pay the teachers the full $4,000 amount.
So while it sounded good from the governor's office that every teacher in the state's going to get a $4,000,
Good news bite.
yeah, it sounded really good on the news, but the reality is they're nowhere near that.
Not in the current formula.
No.
Correct. So we will keep you updated.
Please do.
Hooray.
Thank you.
Any other good news? All right, our next item is, speaking of money, the review of the 8% bond projects. Mr. Romanek.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome.
Just wanted to say a word to Ethan. Ethan, that was a great presentation. And just to put your mind at ease, we are going to recycle that plastic. We already have plans with another vendor. So I wanted to put your mind at ease with that. We can listen as well as students. So tonight I'm going to present the 8% list that we had sent you the other day. Hope you had a chance to review it. But before I do that, I want to explain to you a little bit about it because some of you may know or may not know that 8% bond is kind of not a good description of it. because nobody knows what it means. So 8% is 8% of assessed value. We're allowed to borrow 8% of assessed value without going out for a vote. So that's where that 8% comes from. Most years, we went about $4 million as far as the bond. This year, we're keeping that $4 million again. Projects on these lists usually include projects that we can't put on smaller capital project lists, and we can't put on large bond lists because they don't fit into that parameter. This year is quite different from others. We've funded a couple additional things here, including 2 line items that we're going to spend on architects for pre-design when and if we get that next bond passed. So we'll be able to be shovel-ready once that does pass. We'll save a year, actually. So usually it's a 3-year period. It'll be a 2-year period because we'll have all the footwork done. And no matter what, we're going to need new schools, so that money's never going to be thrown out the window. The other thing on there is some funding, additional funding for a property that we're looking at. It's a little bit more expensive than we thought it would initially be. That number that I have on there is probably a little bit higher than needed, but we don't know how it's going to fall out. So that's where that number comes from. So I thought I'd give you a little insight into all of this. I'm not going to recommend any type of motion. Leanne will do that with her resolution. So I just wanted to field any questions you might have as far as.
one.
Okay.
So from a, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, go ahead. No, you're fine.
So from a 30,000-foot view, and we have many schools and many different corners and nooks and crannies and all that. So can you walk us through an exercise of the decision-making when it comes, because I'm going to make the assumption that you would have had
Sure.
more projects on this list. So kind of walk us through that lane, if you will.
So the initial part of this project begins all the way back at the 10-year facility plan. We update that yearly, but when we're getting together information for a bond, we really have a deep dive into it. So I think the number came out when we were originally looking at it at the board retreat, it was $40 million for maintenance concerns. So that was the number we started with. We whittled it down to $9 million. Leanne and I first spoke, it was at $9 million.
Okay, oh, wow.
Then got it down to like 6, then 5, and now we're sitting at 4. So we meet with all the we meet with schools individually during this process, sit down with principals, administrators after they speak to their teachers. We do walkthroughs of buildings. So we have a good feel for what's going on. We know that, for instance, carpet every 7 to 10 years needs to be replaced, some less time, some more time. We know we have roofing projects that we may have to do that may need, some of the funds may need to come out of here. It's constant, so we keep track of things like that. Painting, which is expensive, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's the 30,000-foot view. So it starts up here, we dig deep, we try to prioritize, and this list had a lot of awnings on it when we first looked at it, probably $1.5 million worth of awnings. And we still go back and forth whether or not that's such a good use of our money, because somebody said it was only 15 days a year it rains, but to the administration and the parents that are, yeah, in those 13 days, right. But they hear a lot from the parents, a lot from the students, so it is a major concern, and we see it every year, so we tried to get to that. Unfortunately, we had a couple other things this year, including the architects and the land expenditures, that those things fell by the wayside. So all of these things on here we felt were a priority, and usually we try to at least give schools 1 or 2 things because they all have priorities. This year is a little bit different, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So for the early site design and the land acquisition, normally we have that in a referendum.
Correct.
We have some money, and I know that this is not covering enough, so this is the extra that we need
This is
over the
extra.
bond
Correct.
money for land that we had left.
Yeah. We had money from the
So-
2018 for one piece of land. This is in addition to
The
that.
last referendum to buy
Yeah.
land, and we bought some, we got some left,
Want
but
some,
not
we've got
enough for
some
the
left. So this
properties
is
they're
in
looking at.
addition to what we potentially would need.
Correct.
So would we then, fast forward, I'll say 5 years, it's not really, but, come on, humor me. So fast forward 5 years from now, and we're working on a bond
or a referendum for the school 12 and 13, middle school 7, the land acquisition, whatnot. Is that something that we would factor into those numbers, that we would then pay this back? Or this is just a straight up,
Leanne probably,
We would just reduce the amount of the bond.
okay,
The referendum
right,
by what we've already funded.
okay. That's all I had.
Good evening. Oh, yeah. Can you walk, so going from the 30,000 now granular, the Fort Mill Elementary School project, second on the list. Can you
Yeah.
walk me through the scope of that project?
it's been on their list for a couple of years now. There's no water up in the front part of that office there. They have a bathroom right around the bend there, so we can connect into that water. So it's kind of an easy project for us. They have the space there. But it's been a priority to them, which is why we put it on this list, that it's so long. And trying to figure out, you know, based on dollar value, that's where it gets tricky, because everybody has a priority, but do we have 75,000 left, or do we have 30,000 left to go ahead and do that?
What are the considerations for including an amount?
We have estimates done,
Do you have estimates for that?
correct.
It's
Very, very general estimates. I don't have line by line, but we get somebody
Right.
to look at it. And
So I suspect where you're gonna go is, oh, that sounds really high for
Yeah.
just a sink. And what because we've done this every year, right? And usually, oh, I could do that for less.
I'm
Right.
just looking to understand, not come to any necessarily accusations or conclusions, because I don't build things for a living.
there'll be other things in there as well. It's not just the sink connected to the water and be done with it. There'll be shelving and various things in there.
And
Yeah.
right, wrong, or indifferent, the process for doing construction at a school is more costly.
Correct. Yeah, you wouldn't believe the prices. I mean,
We have to use certain materials, contractors,
Correct.
suppliers, and
it's not build it yourself. Everybody gets a piece.
I've got a hammer.
I'll give you $5.
So I had a question about, well, two different questions. One about the Riverview project.
Okay?
So that's a fairly new school, but you wanted to add more lights, and I agree with you. I walk there at night
Yep.
when my kids are practicing. I'm just curious as to, did we not use strong enough lights, or do we feel like we need to use more because the lights
There's
we have aren't as
Yeah,
extended?
it's additional lights.
Right.
You know, sometimes when you go through the whole process of building a school or designing a school, things are left out or forgotten, or just the space where it is. Sometimes the way the school's built, the lighting isn't as good as it could be. And these are folks from the cafeteria and stuff that get in there really early, and the custodians that had been telling us about this.
And that makes sense too, because there's certain pockets
around
when you
the-
walk around that school
That's
that are
exactly
much
where it
darker
is.
than others.
That's correct.
So, okay.
Yep.
And the other question I had was about Fort Mill High School, and I know it's an older high school.
Right.
And so it doesn't surprise me that we have these concerns in terms of painting and its safety. But I know that the R wing at the high school used to be Riverview Elementary. And so in my mind, I was thinking that when we upfitted that, we would have fixed that then.
It wasn't an issue. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
But we had folks come in, but they painted on that block, and I guess so much of the paint accumulated that now it's peeling off.
Oh,
So now
oh.
that's what we got to sandblast and then repaint.
So it's really
So it wasn't
the
like
original
that.
elementary paint.
1978.
Yeah,
paint.
and it wasn't like that, you know, when they went and painted it, when we did the renovations, it was fine.
And I'll tell you, having spent so many years at Riverview Elementary, every time I go into the R ring, I still can't figure out where I am.
Right.
So, meaning that you guys have done a tremendous job there, but I didn't realize that you had you painted over the walls, and now that makes more sense.
They're gonna peel back a layer and they're gonna see Christy was here.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've lost my place on the agenda. I don't have my agenda. Where did I put it?
Recommendation for student nutrition.
Oh, yeah.
Food item
Got
contract.
Kelly.
Food item contract, okay.
Good evening. These are some tough acts to follow here.
We're a tough audience.
So what brings me here this evening is we have our contract for milk that procurement put out back in May of 2015. It has reached its useful life. I've extended it as far as I can. It's also a cooperative contract with Lancaster and Chester County schools as well. And it's for the cartons of milk for student nutrition. In 2020, Dr. Epps approved a 2-year extension per our code. That's allowable. At this point, I'm asking you to extend it for me another year. Reason being is right now is not a good time to put this out for bid. We also today, received notice from the South Carolina Department of Education that one of the dairies that's supplying the school food authorities, as of May 31st, will no longer be supplying. And they're going to be moving to our supplier. So it's really, after talking to Tammy, it's really in our best interest to extend this at least 1 year. And again, this time next year, we can look at doing another co-op with the other schools. But right now, we need to lock in our business with them. They're also providing ice cream. So they've agreed to extend that, as well, with no conditions. There is a nominal increase in the milk we were expecting, but there will be no increase on the ice cream if we sign it at the same time.
Does it behoove us to do that for more than a year?
They've only given us a year contract, pricing for a year. We talked about doing it for 2 years, but without knowing what that second year is going to be, I wasn't comfortable signing a second year. So they may come back.
Obviously, we're pleased with this vendor and their suppliers.
Absolutely, yes.
Their service.
It's pet dairy. We've had no delivery issues. We've gone 7 years on this contract. There's been no price increases. They've gone up 2 cents per carton. It's not a huge increase. And they're not gonna go up on the ice cream if we sign these in conjunction. So it'll be for the 22 to 23 school year, and again, for us and the other 2 districts.
So do you need an action item? We don't have it listed as an action item.
Yes, if you could approve, yes.
It's not listed.
It's not as an action item.
You're gonna do it next meeting? That's what we always, y'all told us you like to.
Okay, that's all I was asking, is I didn't know what we needed to do
coming.
tonight.
Okay, we're good.
If we could vote on it tonight, that would be, or if you can't, okay.
We didn't vote on the other.
Okay, that's fine.
That's why I was confused.
So are the other districts that we're in partnership with, are they voting on that as well, or have they already agreed?
We were the lead, so once we approve it, they were okay with us extending it. I had to come get approval from our district. Once I received that, then we just sign it, and it's applicable to all 3.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Oh, don't go anywhere.
Well, you're up.
Yeah, I was saying, we have other action items, just not that one. I believe you were up on our first action item about the new procurement code.
Yes, so this, yes, if there were any questions. And if not, I would recommend, on behalf of the administration, to approve the 3 documents: the code, the procurement policy and procedures, and the exemptions.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration to approve the 3 new documents pertaining to the procurement code, being the code, the manual, and whatever else you would like.
The exemptions.
There you go, and the exemptions.
All right, we have a motion and a second for the code. manual.
Second. Sorry. Not sure everybody can hear me.
We have a motion and a second for the
And a second, and a second.
the code, the manual, and the exemptions for the new procurement code. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Your motion carries.
Great.
Thank you very much. All right, and then we got a couple more.
So I am asking you to consider and approve the resolution related to the annual 8% bond issue that Mr. Romanek has discussed. The resolution is for $4,125,000. This covers the closing costs related to the issue. The actual bond will be $4.9 million because it also includes the June 1st interest payment on the IPRB, the Installment Purchase Revenue Bond agreement that we've had in place for building 2 schools. We have to do that annually. You've already approved that, so that doesn't have to be part of the resolution, but I just wanted to let you know the bond issue would actually be for $4.9 million. I've been working very closely with Mike Gallagher, our bond financial advisor, as well as Theo, our bond attorney. We've also already been working with the county auditor on possibly what debt millage could look like for us. We have right now agreed with the county auditor on what we're going to use for the value of a mill for debt. That can only go up because as we get closer to when he would actually set the millage in August, I'm hoping that the mill value will increase with what we see coming on the tax roll between now and then. But we started working with him. This would be a 3-year payback. The initial plan was that we would do a more aggressive payback, but I've shared with him your desire to try to keep the debt millage as consistent as we can for another year. So we are working very diligently on coming back to that number. Worst case scenario, I think we could have to increase just 1 to maybe 3 mills on the debt side. But I'm hoping we will be able to make that up by the time we get to August. But worst case.
Or even better news if we can get
Or even better news
on the impact fee.
would be huge news. You know, we're running those numbers and it would be tremendous for our taxpayers. But I just wanted to give you kind of worst case scenario. But we are right now, we will go to market and sell on April 27th. But we've been working several different scenarios of these numbers just to try to keep that debt millage as consistent as we can. But this issue has been in our plan. You know, we build in a planned annual issue of around $4 million a year.
And it just sort of rolls every
Correct. So the resolution that we are requesting approval is for the issuance and sale not exceeding $4,125,000 of general obligation bonds.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration to provide for the issuance and sale of not exceeding $4,125,000 in general obligation bonds of Fort Mill School District Number 4 of York County, South Carolina, in one or more series to provide for the issuance of notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds provided hereby to prescribe the purposes for which, my gosh, the proceeds of such obligations shall be expended to provide for the payment thereof and other matters relating thereto. Mr. Romanek, you need to fix this language.
Second, everything but that last part about Mr. Romanek.
I think he needs to get that stuff fixed. We could be far more efficient.
So we
than
have
that.
a motion and a second for general obligation bonds not to exceed $4,125,000. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Thank you.
that motion carries. And then, last but certainly not least, we have got an action item related to our strategic plan that's been under the works for a while.
It has. Good evening. So, let's see. Oh, thought I was doing that right. Thought I knew how to do this. I've done it a few times. Maybe my last. This may be my last. So, this has been a journey. The strategic planning has been a journey. And so just for the public and for the audience, let's talk just a little bit just of background. First of all, I'd like to thank my strategic planning leadership team, Renee Beck and Matt Roaring, for steering this operation with me through the last 4 years, really, in preparation for your approval tonight. So all of you, the school district, community stakeholders, what is a 5-year roadmap? And we know a roadmap, when we take a trip, sometimes there are detours and sometimes there are side trips, and the journey is never a straight line from point A to point B as we discover new things. And so it's a evolving roadmap, if you will. And the why is for continuous improvement. And the how, first we had to examine and do a needs assessment and examine our current reality, look at the gaps in our current reality and where we want to be, our vision, and establish goals, strategies, and action steps for that. So the process, I'm not going to read everything, just so you know, it began in 2019. Thanks to COVID, it kind of got delayed. We got a waiver from the state to delay that process, and we began in earnest again in spring, summer of 2021 with the needs assessment. We had focus groups. We reviewed the cognitive standards and prepared for that accreditation review, which helped to inform the plan. Summer and fall, we finished the needs assessment, developed a framework that the district could use and the schools could use for their school improvement plans that they're all finishing up now. We had strategic planning work. We had our cognitive visit and got feedback from that group. And then in February, we had a stakeholder meeting, and many of you were part of that. We looked at the branding process and our vision and mission and our core beliefs, and that process is still they're still working with that, with the Roads Branding Group, and that will come back at a later time. What we present to the state only has to be the executive summary and the actual strategic plan templates that you have in your packet. By the end of the week, the school improvement plans are going to be complete, right, principals? Or soon. And then finally, April 30th, 2022, we're going to send these to the State Department and be hopefully finished with that and look forward to their feedback. So again, the data sources that we used, all of the things that we talked about and used to set goals and for each of the goal areas. The components, again, the executive summary, which is required. It's the executive summary of the needs assessment. So that's why it's a lot of a narrative. What you have in front of you or you were sent is basically a template that they require us to do, is to go back and show the specific data that we're using and why the goals and strategies are where they are. Goal area, performance goals, strategies, and action steps, you have that document. So just quickly, the goal areas: leadership capacity, leadership and teacher effectiveness. Dr. Epps chaired this. Joe Burke co-chaired the part on communication. You can see the performance goals, and for each of these, again, there are action steps. Generally, the first one, leadership for continuous improvement, is all about using data to drive improvement and consistent practices across the district to improve student achievement. Effective communication, here are some of the data points that we'll be monitoring. We want 98% of the parents to indicate satisfaction with timely communication. And what we found out from Cogni is that even though parents felt like they were getting good information and information on a frequent basis, the two-way, being able to give that feedback back was something that we want to improve on. Strategy 1.3, educator quality. We've talked a lot about recruitment, retention, and evaluation, and the goal to decrease the turnover rate to 8%. It had gone up to over 10%, which in the past it was closer to 7, 8. So we want to, our first strategy is to get back to what's a common acceptable level of turnover, and turnover is from retirement, people moving, anything. But we certainly want to retain our teachers and recruit the best. Leadership development, our Leadership Academy, we implemented a principal performance survey, and we want that piece. The part that needed the most growth was on instructional leadership and professional development, so that is a performance goal for leaders. Goal 2, lots of data-driven performance goals on, we had to have goals for early literacy, K2, for elementary, you can see for math, ELA,
proficiency. For middle and high, or high school, we use the end-of-course exams that we want to get above and beyond what we were prior to COVID. We did have a dip, especially in U.S. history and algebra were some of the ones that we lost some ground on. Dr. Wakesness was the chair of this committee, and I forgot to mention that Liza McGarity was a co-chair of the one prior to that on teacher recruitment and retention. As you can see, it's up there. Strategy goal 2, again, 2.2, rigorous curriculum instruction. And this is all about making sure that students are satisfied with their learning environment and that we continue to work toward having an innovative curriculum and instructional model that is consistent across the board. The question comes up, are we still a STEAM district? Yes, yes. Science, technology, engineering, math, the 5 C's, we want to continue to increase engagement, because when you increase engagement, when students feel like they belong, all students feel like they belong, that's going to help with the social emotional learning piece, that's going to help with achievement, that's going to help with graduation rates and their success in the future. So engagement is a key component of that. And finally, responsive, personalized academic support and recovery, a comprehensive, integrated, 3-tiered treatment integrity of 80 and 75%. Basically, when we develop the framework with through the grant that we talked about before with Kansas, University of Kansas, that will be a protocol and an integrity measure that they will help us measure how well we're doing with that. So we're excited about that. Again, data-driven improvement. Goal area 3, safe and healthy schools and effective social emotional learning. Dr. Maziarz, Gray Young, Leanne Lordo are Leanne's the chair and Amy and Gray co-chairs. And you can see we want, again, to improve student and parent and teacher satisfaction with their physical and social environment. We also want to improve our chronic absenteeism. We want that to get back to 4.5 by 2026. That's something that's gone up in the last couple of years. So those are things that we're working on. Goal area 3, Joe Romanek, Brian Spittle, technology resources. We have goals to improve our technology integration and for finance to hopefully keep our debt millage to less than or equal to 72 mills. So all the processes that Leanne talked about tonight and Ms. Lordo talked about tonight are ways to help to keep that balance for taxpayers, but to meet the needs of schools. So that's a challenge, and there are a lot of strategies to work toward that. And then we want to make sure that as our building plans, that at least over the next 5 years, that 90% of the schools remain at or below their building capacity as measured by that flame chart, where we look at how many schools are over capacity, that we try to keep that. And that's going to require building schools. So the action steps for that are all about building schools and communicating with the public and getting the bond referendum passed. Goal area 4 is a new area for us. It's our district priority to ensure that we close the achievement gaps by equity and access for all students, building equity. And the plan is to have a strategy to have an equity audit and then have professional learning that promotes the performance goals of reducing the gap of pupils in poverty, the graduation rate, ELA, and math proficiency. Those are our largest gaps, and so those are the ones that I put up here. But each school looks at their own achievement gaps and sets goals in their school improvement plans that are more specific by school. This is chaired by Dr. Mike Wakesness, and Renice Sauls is our co-chair. And the executive summary, our culture of excellence is strong. It is strong. That's our current reality. We are a strong district. And we are going to build on those strengths, all of you, teachers, students. It takes everybody. It takes the community. And this plan will make us stronger. So I would ask that you approve this strategic plan, executive summary, and templates of the performance goals that we can submit to the state by April 30th, if you please would do that.
I would like to make a motion that we.
Do you have any questions or any?
We can do that after we have a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration to finalize and submit our strategic plan to the state before the end of the month.
Second.
Motion and second to approve and submit the strategic plan as discussed. Are there any questions?
Ms. McGinn, I think we would be remiss without saying thank you for your passion for education.
Well, thank you.
You can really see that come out. And you got excited by a strategic plan, which is most people find very difficult to do, but you can see in each piece of that and everybody who helped you in creating the strategic plan, you can see that passion in the pieces that they constructed, and then you pulled that out in your presentation. And every time that you have a presentation, you're talking about something like this, I see that passion, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
You
I like
are
spending
helping.
money. And to get all this done, it's going to take money. Leanne did not even look up. Did you notice that?
But not just money, passion.
Yeah,
And your
it
leadership
does.
and example.
Well, no,
helps
I only
our
represent
district.
the people sitting in this room. And the only reason we do it is for several of these people in this room that are sitting there with Miss Miller, that those are our students. That's the only reason we exist. The only reason any of us have a job or you have a position is for our students. And yeah, I'm passionate about that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
That's a Rotary fine.
All right. All those in favor of approving the strategic plan, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, just got to get the final things done for April 30th.
Yay. No pressure.
That's right. All right, we have a superintendent's report. You got a couple things to share?
We do. Nothing near as important as what we just did, which I congratulate and thank Marty and her and everybody for their hard work, but for Marty's leadership, can't thank you enough. It is a journey. It starts about 2 or 3 years prior to this night, and I guess we'll be the next 5-year plan will start in another 2 or 3 years, right? We'll call you back for that. How about that?
Should be bored by then.
Somebody gets to update it
Every year.
Yay.
All right, as we do each year, at the end, it's a winding down, we have multiple months listed on the calendar of events so we can all kind of pace ourselves and see the end is near. The board meeting tonight, spring break next week, I'm sure nobody's keeping up with those days. Board meeting, we come right back on the 19th. And on the 20th, there are a few dates on here that you need to make note of that I've probably mentioned in passing, or maybe I haven't. On the 21st is it's really the town of Fort Mills. Is Jenny in there? It's really the town of Fort Mills awards program. They've invited several school groups to be honored by the governor, and it's at the amphitheater. So I don't know. I called it Town of Fort Mills / Fort Mills School District Awards Program. There's going to be a special award that night, a honor of the
Order of the Palmetto.
yeah, and I don't know if that's public yet, so I'll just say there's going to be somebody who gets that. It's
Just
not me.
now.
Leave it at that.
Not it's somebody you need to go see.
It'll be
Get
an
it.
opportunity to thank the governor for his leadership
For
on
his
the
support.
Yes.
budgetary area.
No comment. Board visits on the 25th, and we may, let's see if the order looks good there. I'd make sure we can make them in Pleasant, Fort Mahine, Orange Park. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. We'll go in that order. Then you get on into May, the board visits Forest Creek. We'll start at Forest Creek, then we'll go up to Riverview. No, we'll go to Riverview, then Forest Creek, then Fort Mill Elementary, then Fort Mill Middle. I'll send you an email on that. The principals meeting, of course. A new date on there, the Fort Mill School District Hall of Fame ceremony, 5 p.m. at the Fort Mill High School Auditorium. The reason it's there is we have 3 band directors going in that night. You've already approved the class.
Yeah.
3 of them are band directors, so it ought to be a nice event. Then we will have the retirement reception this year, live and in person, at 5 o'clock here at the training, or 2 buildings over, the Training and Support Center on the 24th, followed by the board meeting, which is an important meeting, the public hearing for the budget on that night at 6 o'clock. Then we get into, that's really the last week of school or so, the half day, then the work day, then the graduations, Catawba Ridge at 10 a.m. at Winthrop on the 28th. Nation Ford at 2 p.m. at Winthrop on the 28th, and Fort Mill High School at 6 p.m. at Winthrop on the 28th. And then we come back for the final important board meeting of the year, which is the approval of the budget on June the 7th. Now, there may be other dates on there that you have that I failed to mention. Those were just, that was the list we had current as of about Friday. Any other dates?
The Teacher of the Year in Columbia, is that May 4th or 5th?
It is May 4th,
Is that Thursday?
Yes, we should have that on there.
as is the literacy picnic for all of our
The same day?
first graders,
Yeah.
right? During that
That's the
day.
same day.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's at the amphitheater on the
Probably I
Greenway.
should put that on.
The Strawberry Festival, just because it's important, and I know a lot of our school community is involved in different ways, the 6th and 7th of May. And then the Teacher of the Year, this year's Teacher of the Year stuff is coming up on the 7th, right?
Yeah, and what we're gonna do there, we're not gonna, Marty, help me with that, we're not gonna do a meal, we do a ceremony.
Exactly, it's a recognition ceremony for all the teachers of the year, and that's where we'll announce the five
finalists.
teachers for the next year.
And we send invitations to the board members. It's not like a public meeting, but we do send invitations. Yeah.
The only other one I would mention, some of the things we've been talking about tonight, on the 27th of this month is when we have the School Board Association, our day at the Capitol. And I don't know who all is planning to go, but I know throughout the state, the school boards will be
That'll be an important
Converging
week. I
on
believe the
Columbia
Senate will be
to
on the budget that week.
have some conversation. Yeah.
I hope
So,
not.
But, you know, that's the one thing I was always concerned. They always plan this late for us. It would be better
Working on fixing that.
if we could get that, be there a couple weeks ahead of time, or maybe before the House approves their budget.
Cheryl will take care of that in a couple of years.
Thank you, Michelle.
And then do you know the date of the tech dowling? Do we know that date?
Oh.
Because it's in June, so at some point, we just want to add that so we make sure.
9th?
I got it right here somewhere. Oh, you got it?
I haven't heard anything on that
I
yet.
think it's June 9th.
Okay,
I got it written down.
all right, let's just add that as we go forward so that we
It's
keep that.
June- No, it's,
I was thinking it
I
was
thought it was later.
like in the teens.
I reported on that a few months ago.
All right, we'll get that added.
Yeah.
we're gonna have to get it added, because I don't.
Okay,
There you go.
Yeah, see? Teens.
all right.
Teen plus.
Teen
All right.
plus.
Anything else, any other calendar items?
Okay, and then, the enrollment updates, we grew by
7,
total, let me get my
28?
little.
7.
yeah,
Well,
wasn't that many?
yeah, 28, but lost 21, so group of
Yeah,
7.
yeah. Well, no, that's from the 45th day. If you go from the 135th day, if you go from the end of March to the end of April, we actually grew by 17. We must have fallen down, let's see, 862, yeah, we grew by 17. So we
Yeah.
went up on 862 and then went up to 869. And the 145th day, 135th day is in the middle there,
Okay.
so.
Did I see something specifically going on around Gold Hill Elementary to lose 16, something about an
Yeah.
apartment complex
Yeah,
or
it's
something?
in the
That's
second
what-
set,
okay.
yeah.
That caused a
Several students
lot of
returned
families to,
back to the
India.
homeland because of a rent increase in an apartment complex.
That's right.
I thought those were two separate things, but okay.
Then so we're trekking toward our high 17.8s as far as 17.854. And of course, the summer, it really takes off. The winners for teacher attendance awards for the month, Fort Mill High with an attendance rate of 94.18, Pleasant Knoll Middle, 94.03, and Orchard Park Elementary, 94.369. So they're still coming to work at a robust clip,
That's right.
which is good.
It is.
Okay. I think
Anything
that's-
else from you?
No. not mine.
All right, well, we are in need of an executive session to receive personnel recommendations, to discuss legal issues, and to discuss contractual issues. I would entertain a motion to move into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session?
All right, we are in executive session. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.